YouTube? Hope you guys are all doing well. So 2-5 down here at the Seminole Casino Coconut Creek is going to be the move for tonight. It's a Saturday night and down here in South Florida during spring break, so it's only appropriate to assume that there's going to be a good amount of action. Hope you guys enjoy this one. If you haven't already, it'd mean the world if you guys hit that thumbs up button down there and then subscribe if you want to. We are kind of close to 10K, which is pretty cool. So once again, guys, I appreciate all you guys and hope you guys enjoy this one. Peace.
Alright guys, so before we get into the hands, I want to talk about Rad Poker and their new feature on the app called Puzzle Rush. What Puzzle Rush is you get a board and basically you input what the nuts is on that exact board. As the game progresses, you'll have 3 cards, 4 cards, and then 5 cards, and obviously the more cards, the harder it gets. To be as genuine as possible, this is the most fun poker app on the App Store, hands down. Not to mention, they do weekly giveaways, or weekly contests, if you will, where you can win cash prizes. And it's not just like 1 or 2 people win, like 20 people win each week. Links in the description if you want to download. If you could beat my score, screenshot and send me it on Instagram. Let's go. After folding for an hour, we see a button straddle and we're in the small blind with a pretty good hand. We have Jack 10 suited and we happily open up the action to $35. We see a call from the player on the big blind and then action folds back around to the player on the button. The button now decides to put in a smaller raise. The button bumps it up to $110. This is my friend and we do have a lot of experience. I don't think he's getting out of line here, but even if it wasn't my friend, I just don't think he's ever doing this light. Considering I'm the first to act and I open up the action and then the second person to act just calls, I look pretty strong and he looks pretty strong himself. So the fact he's raising us means he definitely has a good hand. Probably like aces, kings, queens, maybe some suited broadways, hands of that nature. With that being said though, this is one of the few combos of hands that I think I'm okay flat calling with out of position multi-way. So that's what I do. I make the call and this does entice the big blind to tag along as well. So we're off to see a flop, which is king 3 deuce all clubs. Okay, this is a really good situation. Action starts off me and I don't see really any point in betting here. I decide to check it and it does check over to the button. The button now throws out $200. Okay. This is getting even better. We each start off the hand with around 1,000. I could definitely flat here, but if I had an overpair containing a club, just the naked ace of clubs, I'd probably be putting in a raise right now. Considering he bet into 2 people and a pretty large sizing, I think he does have an overpair here. Hopefully aces or kings. So if I jam, I think we might be able to level hands of that nature into a call. So that is what I decided to do. I just decided to go all in right now. And what in the world? The big blind doesn't think for too long and makes the call for around the same amount. Okay, was not expecting that. I think he probably has a set here, which we are beating considering the line taken pre-flop. So action's out on the button and he looks pretty uncomfortable and like agonizing. And he does flash his cards, which is aces. And he does decide to throw them in the muck, which is probably rightfully so, just considering all the action beforehand. So now we're off to see a flop and we both expose our hands. He does have pocket 3s, which is good for a set, and we do decide to run out 2 boards. Praying that the board doesn't pair, the 4 diamonds followed by the 7 of diamonds is perfect. So now we just need to fade some pairing cards on the bottom board. But unfortunately, the turn is immediately a 3, giving him quads. So we are not going to be winning that one, but we do decide to chop the button's money. So can't complain with a win, but I wish I would have scooped, obviously. In this next hand, there's a button straddle and a middle position player limps. I'm in the cutoff with king, queen of hearts, so definitely a pretty good hand. I make it $50, and the player on the button, as you guys can see, rips his whole stack in there for around 370 or so. You guys are thinking, oh man, this is an annoying spot, but it really isn't until the middle position player calls. So the player on the button, he just lost a really big one and it was a pretty sick one the hand prior, so he's definitely on tilt. The player in middle position, he's been the most active player at the table and he can arrive with any 2 cards. So I'm sitting here trying to think of a conclusion of what I want to do until I hear the middle position player say, I really don't have that good of a hand. Okay, so yeah, this is poker. People lie, but this time I think he was telling the truth. He said the statement to my friend Justin across the table, which he was not in the hand, so why would he have an incentive to lie to Justin? So against him and then a blind player that's all in, king queen is looking pretty nice. So that being said, I think you guys can guess what I do. I decide to make the call and we're off to see a run out. So the flop comes out ace high, but we have a king and a gutter. The players announce that they do not have an ace, which is a good sign. The turn is a brick, and then the river completes the front door flush. I table my hand assuming that no one has an ace, which they said. Sure enough, the button mucks until the player in middle position shows 6-7 of spades for a flush. So our read on the situation pre-flop was right, but unfortunately, they got to get there sometimes. Nice hand. In this next hand, there's a button straddle on once again, and we're in the small blind. We open up the action to $35 with a pretty good hand. We have 2 black 8s. Well, this bet really doesn't get too far, as we see the big blind player put in another raise. He decides to make it $110. Action folds back around to the girl in the cutoff, and she by far has been the tightest player at the table. For example, she folded ace king face up to a single raise. So when she makes this call of $110, I can almost always put her on a range of basically 10s through like queens. She'd probably be re-raising kings and aces, so I think she has a pretty narrow range. It folds back around to me, and putting her on that range, and if we do flop an 8 and a bunch of low cards, I think we can win a pretty big pot. So I decide to make the call, and we're off to see a flop. So unfortunately, we do not flop an 8, but the flop is pretty good. It is all spades, and it is 10 high. Action starts with me. I check it. The player in the big blind checks, and now the cutoff bet's $225. I am definitely going to be folding for that amount. If I raise, I'm not getting her to fold any hands that beat mine, and our spade might not be live. The big blind does make the call though, so we're off to see a turn, which I do not remember it, but I do remember that stacks ended up getting in on either the turn or the river. The cutoff had pocket 10s for top set, and the player in the big blind had pocket jacks with the spades, so we are in pretty bad shape on the flop and pre-flop. Nice hand. In this next hand, we're in the hijack with queen jack of clubs. I open up the action to $20, and we see 3 players behind me make the call, so we're going to be going 4 ways to a flop. So we flop a pretty good draw. We flop a flush draw on 6, 7, 8. Action checks to me, but on a board like this is just going to connect with the other players so hard. I think the best play here is just to check it and put in money once I hit my draw. So that's what I do. I check it, and action does check around. The turn now is a very interesting card. It is a 9 of diamonds, putting in another flush draw, but it also gives us a gutter to go along with our flush draw. Action checks to me, and now I'm not going to get any player to fold a straight here, so I think the best course of action is to check and then call a bet. So I check it, and now the player on the cutoff does bet out $75. The button gets out of the way, the big blind calls, and I think we do have a pretty easy call here. If we hit a 10 or a club, I think we can win a pretty big pot. Praying to see a club or a 10, but nope. We break it all as the river's another 8. The small blind leads out on this card, and we snap fold. In this next hand, there's a under the gun straddle, and we see +1 raised to $75. A really big raise, but he has not shied away from action, so I don't really interpret this as being super strong. When we look down at ace king, this is a bit of a weird spot because the raise is so big, but we do have a pretty good hand and we want to play it in position. So I decide to put in another raise to $210. Action folds back around to the player in the big blind, and wow, he goes all in. Around $800 is the wager, and before he even slid out his chips, the player who straddled makes the call for less. The initial raiser snap folds, and wow, what a interesting spot. So we have ace king. We already put in $225 in the middle. We see another jam behind us, and then essentially a cold call from the player on the straddle. Wow. I guess one of these players has to have a good hand, right? Well, sure, they could, but these two players, they are not shying away from action one bit. So ace king is definitely going to be ahead of these players' ranges, even though on paper, if you will, it looks like a pretty miserable spot. So I make the call, and we're off to see 2 boards. Praying to see an ace or king or straight or anything or a flush or whatever, we just want to win a pot. Unfortunately, the first board is garbage. Luckily for us, the second board we do hit an ace, so we're feeling pretty good on that one. Everyone announces that they have an ace. Okay, well we have the best ace, so that's good. Assuming that we're chopping, and that is what's going to be happening. I'm going to be chopping the pot with a player that was on the under the gun straddle, and I actually win the side pot against the big blind, who had ace 10 offsuit. So even though we did chop the main pot, we still ended up making a few $100s in this hand. I'll definitely take it. This is definitely one of the craziest hands I played in a while. another gun opens to 20, the low jack calls, I call in the cutoff, and we see the blinds call as well. So we're going 50 ways to a flop with a hand that is really not that good, but we are in position. So once again, flatting 7-4 suited pre-flop is really not that ideal unless the flop comes jack 5-8 with 2 clubs. Wow, are you kidding me? We flop a flush draw and a gutter with one of the most garbage hands pre-flop. Checks to the big blind and he leads out for $40. Now the player in the low jack raises to $100, definitely a small raise. Now we're in a bit of an annoying spot, but our hand is too good to fold. We have way too much equity. I just decided to make the call in position, and this does entice the big blind to call as well after the small blind folds. So going 3 ways to a turn, praying for a club or a 6, and we get a freaking 6. Single best card in the deck. The big blind checks to the player in the low jack, and it's like music to my ears. He goes all in for a massive overbet. I pretty quickly call, and the big blind snap folds. And to my surprise, he has 8-6 of clubs. Wow. We were in miserable shape on the flop, but now we have to fade a club, an 8, or a 6. Can we hold? The first river is a jack of hearts, so we're going to be getting half the pot. And the second river is a 5 of hearts. What in the world just happened? That is single-handedly one of the most crazy hands I played in a while. What looked like a great flop actually only left us with 4 clean outs. So even though we won this hand, this should be a lesson to avoid hands such as this pre-flop, because you can be left in miserable spots such as this one. If I wouldn't have hit a 6, it would have been pretty costly for me. In my defense though, they were vlog watchers and I just wanted to try to beat him with a garbage hand. He took the bad beat exceptionally well, and once again, I'm sorry man, that was definitely a pretty sick one. In this next hand, we throw on the button straddle and we see a small blind raise to 30. He's a vlog watcher and he says that this is one of his first times playing 2-5, so I definitely think he is not doing this light. There's 2 calls behind him and it folds back around to me, and this sounds stupid and like not advised, but he insists that we want to get in a pot together, so I decide to make the call in position with a hand that is not that good, ace-8 offsuit. We're off to see a flop 4 ways, which is about as dry as it gets. It is jack-jack 4 rainbow. This time, he decides to check it and action checks over to me. So I'm pretty sure I know what's going on here. I'm pretty sure that the small blind player has a really good hand, but he's scared that one of us may have a jack. I'd assume one of the other players would bet a jack, so I think I'm going to take the betting lead and start a bluff in this hand. I throw out a half pot bet of $60. If the small blind player calls this bet, I can almost always put him on a overpair, which is now 2 pair, or flop quads. He does decide to make the call and the other players get out of the way. So I'm going to continue to tell my story on the turn, and if I get raised, I'm just going to have to fold. The turn now is a 3 of hearts, so definitely a really good card to continue telling my story. He checks over to me once again, and I really don't think he has a jack considering he checked the flop multi-way. So I'm just going to continue to apply pressure on this card. I decide to throw out $200. This is going to put a lot of overpairs in a pretty miserable spot because I'm sizing up for a river shove. After thinking for around 2 minutes, he is clearly agonized, and sure enough, our read on the situation was actually spot on. He decides to fold pocket aces face up. Okay, I'll be honest. I didn't really know he was that strong, but I did figure that he didn't have a jack, which was correct. Luckily for us, he folded the hand that was light years ahead of ours. Now the game's about to break, and we're playing 3-handed. You don't see that too often on the vlog. There's a button straddle, I'm in the small blind, and I open up the action to 35 with 2 10s. I actually think I can go a little bit bigger considering we're short-handed, and the button decides to make the call. So we're heads up out of position with my friend, which comes a 10. So a pretty wet board with a flush draw out there, but definitely not going to be slowing down. Short-handed, I actually think I like a larger sizing here. I don't play short-handed all that often, so I really am not happy with the way I played this hand in hindsight. I throw out $40, and he doesn't think for too long and does decide to make the call. So definitely want to be putting more money in on any clean turn. The turn now is a 3 of diamonds. So this card is about as clean as I want. Definitely want to continue betting. I throw out $100, but in hindsight, I think I could size up a lot. Considering we're short-handed, it's pretty hard to hit a pair, so I'd imagine he'd be continuing with a lot of his hands and a lot of his draws. But luckily this bet induced a raise. He now sizes up to $210, basically min clicking me. Okay, not too sure how this 3 of diamonds helped him, but that's the thing about shorthanded. If he has a hand such as like Jack 3 suited, King 3 suited, he now picked up 2 pair. So this is where I think I messed up. I think putting in another raise here is actually ideal because if he has any of those 2 pair hands, he's just not folding. If he has a flush draw, I don't think he's folding. If he has top pair, I don't think he's folding. If he has a straight, so be it, whatever. But I just decided to make the call, and we're off to see a river, which is a 6 of diamonds, so a very good run out. When action starts off with me, now I'm in a bit of a pickle by not raising the turn. If I check it and he checks back a king, that'll be a pretty miserable situation. But if he does have a flush draw, he's going to be inclined to put in a bet. I don't know. I just decided to lead on this card for 200. I think this can accomplish a few things. One is I'd imagine 2 pairs would still be raising for value. 2, since this is my friend and I know he's pretty aggressive, I think he can interpret this bet as being like a blocker bet in a sense. And I'd imagine he'd still be raising a lot of his busted draws on this card with the sizing that I took. I don't know. I really don't play shorthanded all that often. But he goes well into the tank. So now I can eliminate a lot of strong hands out of his range. And he does decide to make the call after tanking for a while. I show, and we're obviously good, but considering he tanked so long in the river, I think I actually got max value. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think about this one in the comments. So as I'm stacking up my chips from the prior hand, I throw on the button straddle, and we see a small blind limp. The player that was in the big blind, which is my friend, he decides to get out of the way, and we look down at 2 kings very next shuffle. I bump it up to $50, and now the small blind player doesn't think for too long and puts in another raise of $225. Wow. Okay, so this player, he plays very straightforward and he doesn't get out of line one bit. I think he definitely has a really strong hand here, but we have the second best hand in Hold'em, so I just want to get the money in now and level him into a bad call. Sure, I could just flat since we're in position, but being shorthanded, I think I could be doing this with a few bluffs, and I think he could interpret that. So I'm just going to jam now, hoping to get called by a worse pair. He doesn't snap call, so now we know that we are good, and we're praying for a call. After a few short seconds, he does decide to put in a chip, signaling a call. We decide to run 2 boards, and hopefully we can hold. The first board has an ace in the window, but there's a king right next to it. The runout's clean, and I go ahead and table my kings. Obviously, we're going to be winning this one. On the second board, there's another ace, which is pretty worrisome, but he says that we're good on that one as well. And after I table my kings, he's quick to show pocket queens. Wow, a very gross spot for him. 3-handed, he runs queens into kings. Definitely cooler on his part. I don't think there's much he could have done about it, but what can I say? I'm just really happy that we were on the good end of this cooler. Well, after this one, he decided to not rebuy and leave, and my friend did not want to play me heads up, or it could have been the other way around. You guys will never know. But the session is over, unfortunately, and we hit the cage, booking one of our biggest profits to date in a 2-5 game. Let's freaking go.
What's up, guys? Forgot to film my outro, but we were in the game for that amount. We were out of the game for whatever that says, and we won over $4,000, which is freaking awesome. Anyways, guys, hope you guys enjoyed this one. Yeah, this is what it looks like behind the scenes. Pretty boring stuff. Once again, guys, hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys down at the film in the next one. Hopefully. Hopefully, if you guys are whatever. I'm rambling. Peace.